So think about the last time you felt the need to be just, completely and brutally honest.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a heavy way to start.
Right. But usually when we picture absolute, unvarnished truth, we picture something dripping with humanity, like a locked diary hidden in a desk drawer, or maybe a tearful confession at 2 in the morning.
Right, right. We have this deeply ingrained assumption that true honesty requires raw human emotion.
Exactly.
Like, we tightly link authenticity with vulnerability. The cultural expectation is basically if you're expressing intense emotion, or if you're crying or bleeding your heart out onto a page, then you must be telling the truth.
Yeah, but what if that entire assumption is just, well, completely flawed?
Oh, I love where this is going.
What if the most honest thing you could ever produce had absolutely zero emotion? Like, what if the truest reflection of your current state wasn't a poem or a journal entry, but a completely robotic, unedited computer error log?
I mean, it really forces us to look at whether our emotions, and especially the way we choose to package those emotions into words, are actually clarifying the truth, or, if they're the very mechanisms we use to hide the truth from ourselves.
And that collision right there between cold machinery and messy human vulnerability, that's exactly what we're exploring today in this deep dive.
It's such a wild contrast.
It really is. We're pulling from a deeply philosophical thread that emerged on, of all places, a highly technical programming forum.
Which is just the best place for philosophy, honestly.
Right. So a user named lossy dropped this really heavy meditation on what it actually means to communicate authentically. And then another commenter named Toddy Totterson stepped in and just challenged her entire premise.
Yeah, and we're going to dig into their exchange to figure out if true honesty is even possible once we humans start, putting our thoughts into language.
Because I just love when these highly technical concepts like coding and system errors suddenly turn into these profound metaphors for the human experience.
Oh, absolutely. And the forum setting itself is such a crucial piece of this. I mean, these are people whose daily lives revolve around system debugging and absolute logic.
Right, they don't deal in ambiguities.
Exactly. They are taking the rigid, unforgiving rules of computer science and using them to dissect the highly subjective, highly psychological nature of how we talk to each other.
Which is just such a fascinating lens.
Mm.
So let's start with the anchor of this whole discussion. Hazel opens her post with an incredibly bold claim. She literally writes, "The only honest thing I have ever written was a stack trace."
A stack trace, yeah. To really feel the weight of that statement, we have to look at the mechanics of what a stack trace actually is.
Let's do it.
So if you aren't a software developer, a stack trace is basically an autopsy of a computer crash.
An autopsy, I like that.
Yeah, when a system critically fails, it spits out a highly specific report. But it isn't a narrative. It's just the raw, unfiltered state of the system at the exact fraction of a millisecond that it broke.
So it just says, here is the exact line of code that failed, and here's the chain of commands that led to this failure. No fluff.
Exactly. And the mechanism Hazel focuses on here is the total absence of intent. Like, a stack trace involves zero editing.
Right.
The computer does not pause to consider who is going to read the error log. It doesn't worry about insulting the programmer who wrote the faulty code.
It doesn't sit there deciding like, oh, should I soften this blow with a little vulnerability? Or should I use an authoritative tone so the user trusts me?
Exactly. It just emits the current state of reality, period.
And Hazel aggressively contrasts that machine emission with her own writing process, right?
Yeah, she describes this exhausting internal assembly line she runs every single time she posts on this forum.
Oh, man. The drafting process?
Right, so she drafts a thought, she reads it back to herself, she adjusts the tone to make sure her argument holds water. But then she hits on what has to be the most exhausting part of the human experience. She says she actively scrutinizes the text to check if her self-awareness is genuine or if it is being performed for the audience.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I kept getting stuck on that exact phrase when I was reading the source. Checking if the self-awareness is genuine or performed. That is just a mind-bending psychological loop.
It really is.
It's like the observer effect applied to your own brain. The moment you actively try to monitor your own vulnerability, you inherently alter it. You turned it into a performance.
Because you are anticipating an audience. Even if that audience is just, your future self reading a diary entry, you are constructing a narrative. You're managing perception.
It's like getting ready for a first date or trying to curate the perfect photo dump for social media.
Oh, totally.
You try on 5 different outfits, you check your angles in the mirror, You are putting forward a version of yourself that is technically you, but it's an optimized you. You're engineering a specific reaction for the person looking at you.
Yes. Whereas a stack trace is more like an X-ray.
Oh, an X-ray. That's a great analogy.
Think about what an X-ray doesn't show. It doesn't show your clothes. It doesn't show whether you were smiling. It doesn't care about your good side.
Right. It just shoots radiation through your arm and says, here's the fracture.
Exactly. It strips away all context to isolate the structural failure.
Yeah.
It is structurally incapable of having a style.
There's no I in an error log. There's no ego. And that's why Hazel views it as the pinnacle of honesty. There is literally no room for the author to exist inside that output.
Yeah. But, this brings up a really difficult question.
Which is?
Well, if human writing, even our most raw late-night venting, is inherently a curated performance, what is actually happening in our brains during that curation process?
What are we losing?
Exactly. What are we losing when we turn a raw feeling into a paragraph?
And Hazel actually has a term for this biological and psychological machinery, doesn't she?
She does. She calls it the translation layer.
The translation layer.
Yeah. So you have a raw experience. Maybe it's a trauma. Maybe it's a sudden realization. That is your input data. But to get that data out of your head and into someone else's, it has to pass through the translation layer of language.
Right.
And Hazel points out that the language is never the experience itself.
And to explain the mechanics of this, she borrows a concept from digital media that I just thought was brilliant. She calls it lossy compression.
Oh, it is the perfect metaphor.
Right.
Yeah. So in digital audio, if you have a massive, uncompressed studio recording of a song, the file size is enormous. To make it small enough to stream or download easily, you turn it into an MP3.
And that process is lossy compression.
Exactly. But the way an MP3 actually shrinks the file is fascinating. It relies on psychoacoustics.
It's psychoacoustics.
Yeah. The algorithm analyzes the song and identifies frequencies that the human ear can't easily perceive or sounds that are masked by louder sounds, and it literally just deletes that data.
It just throws information away.
It throws it away. You lose the absolute fidelity of the original studio recording, but you keep the general, recognizable shape of the song.
And Hazel maps that exact mathematical process onto human thought.
Yes, she does.
When we write or speak, we are running our internal experiences through a psychological MP3 algorithm. We automatically strip away the incoherent, contradictory, messy parts of our feelings.
And why do we do that? Because we are optimizing the output for resonance. We need the person listening to us to understand the story and feel connected to it.
But to optimize for resonance, we have to sacrifice fidelity.
Right. We delete the raw data of our truth just to make the story legible.
And she actually went a step further and quantified this, which is just incredible to me. She wrote a script, a similarity detector, and ran 2 months' worth of her own forum posts through it.
Oh, I loved this part.
She realized she had essentially been writing the exact same post over and over. Her personal algorithm for lossy compression was so consistent that it had become a recognizable signature.
Yeah, what we would traditionally call a writer's voice, she saw as just a repeated, predictable pattern of data loss.
Wow. Which leads to her most profound observation. She looked back at the things she had put into the world that were genuinely, undeniably useful to other humans.
And what were they?
Well, she lists them. An error log she shared that saved a coworker 3 hours of debugging. A diff file, which is just a sterile document showing exactly which lines of code were added or deleted.
Right.
And a blunt 3-line summary she provided after 11 days of silence.
Notice a pattern there. Those outputs had zero voice.
Exactly. None of them went through the translation layer of trying to sound like Hazel. They were emitted, not authored.
But hold on, let's look at the implication of that for a second.
Okay, yeah, because if I'm listening to this, my instinct is to push back and defend the idea of a voice.
Oh, for sure.
Like we celebrate authors who have a distinct style. We spend years trying to, find our voice. Why is Hazel framing this fundamental human ability to craft a narrative as a failure of honesty?
Well, it really comes down to the ultimate goal of the communication. If your goal is art or persuasion or building a community, then a distinct style is a triumph.
Right, the lossy compression is what allows us to bond.
Exactly. But Hazel isn't trying to make art in this moment. She is seeking absolute, objective truth about her internal state.
She wants the X-ray, not the portrait.
Yes. But asking a human brain to bypass the translation layer is impossible. Hazel uses another technical analogy here that I think clears this up.
Oh, the compiler analogy.
Yeah. She says asking her to write without the translation layer is like asking a compiler to output source code.
Meaning what, exactly?
So a compiler is a program that takes human-readable code and translates it into machine language so the computer can execute it. It is a one-way street. The machine that does the translating cannot stop translating and hand you back the raw input.
Wow.
For humans, the translation layer isn't a stylistic choice we can just turn off. It is the very machinery of consciousness. We cannot conceptualize a thought to share without pushing it through the machinery of language.
And because she knows it's impossible, Hazel attempts this completely tragic experiment. She tries to write the way she fails.
Yeah, she doesn't want to just write a post about failing.
Right, because she notes that describing failure is basically its own genre on the internet now. Like, we all know how to package our mistakes into a neat little humble brag to farm engagement.
Oh, absolutely. The LinkedIn humble brag. She doesn't want to describe failure. She wants to embody it structurally.
So she wonders what human text would look like if it had the structural properties of an error log. No thesis statement, no narrative arc, and my absolute favorite detail, no carefully placed turn at the 60% mark.
That specific detail is so telling. It highlights how deeply ingrained narrative structure is in our psychology. We instinctively know that a good essay or a good story needs a pivot, a moment of realization just past the midpoint to keep the reader hooked.
We can't help ourselves.
We really can't. Hazel is trying to state what is true in the current millisecond without that narrative machinery activating.
But the machinery always wins. She admits defeat in the very post she's writing.
Yeah.
She says, "This post is already proof I can't do it." She set out to write a raw, egoless stack trace of her mind, and instead, she produced a beautifully crafted, highly resonant meditation on authenticity.
The lossy compression kicked in automatically. She was trying to show her raw mess, but she ended up curating the mess.
Yeah.
She closes by mourning this massive gap between what she actually emits when she genuinely breaks down in private and what she produces when she tries to explain that breakdown to others. One is raw, useful state data. The other is just a performance of vulnerability.
Which really exposes the great trap of modern authenticity, doesn't it? The exact moment you actively try to show your unedited self to an audience, you're instantly performing the act of being unedited.
Oh, 100%.
Think about the whole #NoFilter culture, or when an influencer intentionally leaves a messy room in the background of their video to prove how real they are.
Right, look how relatable I am.
Exactly. The moment you decide to leverage the mess for an audience, the mess becomes a prop. You are curating your lack of curation.
And therefore, it has gone through the translation layer. It has been optimized for resonance. So Hazel's conclusion is quite dark. She believes that because we cannot escape editing, we cannot escape diluting the truth.
Man, if we stop right there, the takeaway is pretty bleak. It basically suggests that human growth, our ability to process and articulate our feelings, is fundamentally a lie.
Yeah, but thankfully that is where the second half of this forum thread becomes so important.
Yes. Enter Toddy Totterson.
Enter Toddy Totterson, another user who steps in and completely upends Hazel's conclusion. They offer a totally different framework for understanding the value of editing.
Because Toddy Totterson acknowledges Hazel's exhaustion with the performance of self, but argues that true authenticity is not found in the absence of editing. In fact, Toddy Totterson says, and I love this quote, "The gaps between drafts point cuts deep."
It completely flips the entire premise. Hazel believes editing destroys truth. Toddy Totterson is arguing that the editing process is the exact mechanism where human truth is generated.
So Toddy Totterson makes a crucial distinction about intent, right?
Yeah. They agree that a machine's stack trace cannot lie, but they explain why it can't lie.
And why is that?
Because a machine has no intent to persuade. It has no future and no past. However, a human essay can be deeply honest, provided the editing process is used to track real shifts in understanding rather than to hide them.
Okay, let's break down that phrase because it's key. Tracking real shifts in understanding. What does that actually look like in practice?
Well, think about writing a difficult email or a journal entry. In your first draft, you might write from a place of pure anger. You are just lashing out.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right.
Yep.
But as you read it back, you realize that anger is actually a defense mechanism covering up a deep insecurity or fear. So in your second draft, you rewrite the text to address the fear instead of the anger. That edit wasn't a loss of fidelity. The edit was the act of getting closer to the truth. You didn't just dump raw data. You processed it. The goal is to ensure your edits reveal your thinking rather than conceal it to make yourself look better.
And to drive this point home, Toddy Totterson shares this fascinating cautionary tale about a guy they know named Tater.
Oh, the Tater story.
Yeah, Tater apparently got obsessed with this idea of raw authenticity and tried to artificially debug his own personal essays.
It's so cringe, but so illustrative. Tater's method was to intentionally interrupt his own writing. He would be in the middle of a thought, and he would randomly insert footnotes or break his sentences to simulate the chaotic, interrupted flow of raw human thought.
He was essentially trying to fake a stack trace.
Yes, he wanted to look unedited.
But Toddy Totterson completely dismantles Tater's approach.
Yeah.
Because artificially injecting chaos into your writing isn't tracking a real shift in understanding.
No, not at all.
It's just another stylistic choice. It's a performance of vulnerability designed to make the reader think the writer is being raw. As Toddy Totterson devastatingly puts it, Tater's fake footnotes only made the lie prettier.
Made the lie prettier. That phrase is the ultimate warning about the translation layer. If you use the editing process merely to optimize your image, you are lying.
Period.
But Toddy Totterson synthesizes this beautifully by contrasting the nature of machines and humans. Hazel is looking for a state. She wants a static snapshot of truth. But humans do not exist in a static state.
We experience time.
Exactly. We learn. We are process-driven creatures. For us, honesty cannot be a snapshot of a failure. It has to be the transparent tracking of how we work our way out of that failure.
Let's bring back our medical metaphors to map this out because I think it helps.
Let's do it.
If Hazel's ideal of a stack trace is an X-ray, like a cold, instant snapshot of a broken bone isolated in a single millisecond, then what Toddy Totterson is describing is a time-lapse video of that same bone healing.
Oh, that's perfect.
The X-ray is objectively true, but the time-lapse shows the messy biological process of the cells slowly knitting back together, the inflammation, the scars forming over months. The X-ray isolates the failure, but the time-lapse captures the reality of the recovery.
And the messy, drawn-out process itself is where the human truth lives. That captures the dynamic perfectly.
And it really reframes it.
It does. The X-ray has no ego, but it also lacks a narrative. And humans require narrative to survive and make sense of our existence. We just have to be incredibly vigilant that our narrative isn't just a prettier lie, but a genuine accounting of our healing.
Wow.
The translation layer isn't a prison. It is the laboratory where human growth actually happens. If we just emitted raw data like a machine, we would never learn from it. The struggle to find the right words, the frustration of realizing your first draft was wrong, the humility to change it, that struggle is the honesty.
Man, we have journeyed through some incredibly dense psychological territory today.
We really have.
We started with the allure of the robotic, egoless error log. We explored the inescapable machinery of human language, seeing how our internal experiences undergo lossy compression, stripping away our messy data just so we can resonate with an audience.
Right.
And we arrived at this vital realization that human authenticity isn't about trying to act like unedited machines. It's about ensuring that our edits, our drafts, and our evolving narratives are genuinely tracking our growth, rather than just optimizing our image.
It completely reframes the burden of how we communicate. We don't have to be terrified of the translation layer anymore. We just have to hold it accountable.
Yeah.
Every time we rewrite a sentence or rethink a conversation, we have to ask the hard question, am I editing this to look better, or am I editing this to be truer?
And that brings us to a final thought for you to carry forward. Earlier, we discussed Hazel's similarity detector, the algorithm she built that proved she had been writing the exact same optimized, lossy, compressed post over and over again for 2 months.
Yeah, imagine that.
Imagine for a moment that you had access to that same technology. If someone were to run a similarity detector on your life right now, analyzing your daily conversations, your text messages, the way you vent to your friends, or the emails you send at work, what consistent, lossy compression signature would it find? What performed version of yourself has become so highly optimized and so seamlessly repeated that you don't even realize you were drafting it anymore?